don't realize how badly you don't know your own password for your internet because you're so used to everything logging in automatically.
Oh, I know. That's the every time I have to actually type in my new password again, it's like, well, guess I'm making a new password. Forget.
Are we actually?
This is preamble. Doesn't really matter. We can start it whenever.
We're gonna axe all of this.
Maybe, or I'll leave it in as a joke. I do that sometimes. Let me see if I can find. But I didn't want to walk over and walk back. Hello, fellas, ladies.
Yes, we're back.
Why?
You didn't hear The Last of Us.
Judging by the numbers, most of them didn't hear the first of us either.
You thought we would stop with the Wheel of Time? No. You thought we forgot we were going to talk about Elantris, but we didn't.
Somehow through the haze of alcohol, which we're cutting back a little bit on this time. I have to drive home, so I'm going to...
Guys and gals, this is going to be a much shorter episode. Because
soberer.
He's got to drive, so we're only having one round. It's a strong round, but only one round.
I want to. Plus, somehow I got to tie this in because the last time, it's like the last time I made a video, but also last time I was there, we were talking. It's like, well, I've been dating for 3 days, and now the next podcast episode, also I'm engaged. So that date went well.
She decided to keep him for some reason.
Right. But yeah, today we're going to talk about what we talked about last time. As we said, we were a little negative, you might say, on the Wheel of Time. We were a tad on the negative side. So we want to talk about something a little more positive, and I had faith that you would enjoy some Sanderson.
And I did. In the span since that last episode, even though our lives have gone haywire for a bit.
Oh my gosh, I don't even...
Yeah, it's been a ride, but I was able to read both Elantris and the first Mistborn novel.
Yes, I read them either in one... I think I read Mistborn in that time, and I read Elantris right before you read it. So it's been pretty... Within the last 6 months, we both read these. And I've read them twice, so yeah.
Yes, unlike The Wheel of Time, I actually liked both of these books. So this is also going to be kind of a shorter episode because I'm not going to spend 3.5 hours like riffing on these because there's not really that much to make fun of. It's actually pretty good.
Well, we're also talking about 2 books instead of 10 plus.
Yeah, 10 that I read.
Yeah, well. So we're going to start with Elantris, I think, which is fitting because that is Sanderson's first major published novel.
Yeah, our decision to talk about Sanderson, we thought we would go through all the books as he published them.
Yeah, which is...
So that's about the order you can expect him to show up in
roughly,
this podcast.
We may tweak things a little bit,
we'll
sure.
see. Yeah, but nothing's set in stone. All right, but yes, so today our first order of business is to talk about Elantris. And I gotta say, the first thing I want to say about this book, I have the UK
one, right?
the UK cover,
UK covers are so much better.
Published by Orion Books at the Glance publisher. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Apologies to the Glance publisher if I said your name wrong twice.
Let's go for 3rd.
But that'll probably be way more than 3 before this is done. But I have to talk about the cover to this book because I actually collect books, especially... I don't have audiobooks at all. Every book I read, I own an actual print copy of, and I always try to make sure that all the print copies have the same cover style. And that is a royal pain sometimes, especially when you're like reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is awesome, but they changed cover styles halfway through.
Yep.
So none of my covers match, and that makes me very angry. But I have to say, so all that is to say that cover art, and no, you never judge a book by its cover, but cover art to me is kind of important. Because I like seeing covers that are all the same style that are beautiful and it makes my collection look very good. And I gotta say, this cover for Elantris and for Mistborn as well look awesome in the UK print.
The UK, well, it's widely known among the Sanderson community that the UK prints are usually like the way to go. They're really well done. I wish I knew off the top of my head who does the art for them, but it's maybe you can look.
Cover illustration done by Sam Green.
There you go. Sam Green, hats off to you.
He did Elantris, and I believe someone else did Mistborn, but
cool.
They emulated the style. Mm-hmm. In either case, it is beautiful art. If you can afford to get the book from the UK publisher, and you can actually get them pretty cheap from Book Depository on Amazon.
Oh.
So if you collect covers or you just want a more beautiful version of the book, there you go.
Yeah.
But without further ado, let's talk about the actual content of the book.
Okay, so do we want to start with a quick... We're going to try and keep this, I think, spoiler-free at first, at least. We said we might delve into some spoiler territory later, but we'll see. We're going to start out. So, basic setting for this book. Well, I guess first off, we should say this is your first Sanderson book, right?
Yes, this is my first time reading Brandon Sanderson.
Who is my favorite living author, and I've highly recommended him to you for years now.
Yeah, years. Actual years.
Yeah, literally years.
We've come a long way since we were those two awkward guys sitting in the back of that computer science night class.
Oh, yeah.
You were like, do you know who Brandon Sanderson is? now I do.
Now you do. It's come full circle. And now I have a job in IT because of your help, and you're reading Brandon Sanderson. The prophecy is complete. Oh my gosh.
The circle is complete.
Oh no. Podcast over.
Okay.
But so, do you want to do setting or me? How do you want to start with summary?
Let's let you lead.
Okay. So the basic setup for this is that it's a fantasy world, and there was this giant, glorious civilization in the city of Elantris. The people there are basically demigods. They're like really powerful. They've got great magic, and Elantrians are chosen seemingly at random. There might be something to it, but it's. And if you're in the right area and have the right blood, you have a chance of becoming an Elantrian, and then you get taken up to the city, and your family gets taken care of, and you basically rule the country. Then, how long ago? 20 years ago or something?
It is 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Something changes, and all the Elantrians go from being like these glorious near gods into basically zombie-looking things. They keep their mental faculties, but they just... everything falls apart.
And hither to that point, the Elantrians were the heads of society, but now that that thing has happened and they've lost their magic...
Yeah, the Sheod, I think they call it, right?
Yeah. They have been completely outmoded, basically. Yeah. And so now a new merchant class has arisen, and they now rule the country.
Oh no, another thing on our web series. Oh gosh, everything's everything.
No.
Oh, we gotta go back to the drawing board. But anyway, yeah, so merchant class has taken over, and that's the new world government, and I love the first, can I open real quick?
Yes.
The first line is one of the, he's bragged about this, but it does have one of the best first lines to a book ever.
If you want to know how to write an attention-grabbing first line,
yeah. Prince Raoden of Erelon woke early that morning, completely unaware that he had been damned for all eternity.
There you go. There you go.
So yeah, from there, one of our primary or POV characters, Raoden, finds out he has been taken by the Sheod, and he's thrown into Elantris, which instead of being a glorious hub of society is now...
it's just this decaying husk of a city.
Zombie prison, where they keep all the people that... because you're like diseased, basically. You keep your mental faculties, at least initially.
To a degree, yes.
You're not, you don't, but you... And the interesting shtick, basically, is that your body is dead, even though your mind's mostly there. But every bit of pain you experience stays forever.
Well, they still feel hunger, too.
That's true, they do feel... Yeah,
because that's a big part of the book, too.
Yeah, but every pain, every bit of pain you have sticks with you. So if you get pinched, that never dulls. If you stub your toe, that never dulls.
I do... This was the biggest complaint I have about the book, was that they imply that the reason they feel pain is because their bodies cannot heal from injury. Even though, and this is me just like going off on tangents about how nerve endings work, but that's not necessarily explicitly how pain works in the human body.
Right.
Pain is not it does not mean injury. Pain is an indicator of possible injury.
Yeah.
This is why if you get pinched, the pain ends with the pinch ends, unless the pinch has done lasting damage to you. So that was an issue I had with the book. It was pretty early on, Raoden stubs his toe in Elantris, and it's like he has to go the rest of the novel hobbling because he stubbed his toe once. And I'm like, I understand your reasoning behind that, Mr. Sanderson, but the problem is that just because he stubbed his toe doesn't necessarily mean he injured his toe. And you could have fixed that really easy by saying he stubbed his toe with enough force that it broke, which you can do.
Yeah.
And that was just a thing that, and that just annoyed me. And it is telling that is the biggest complaint I have with this book. Because, and I can't stress this enough, this book is awesome.
Oh, yeah. This is one of my favorite. This is a 5 out of 5 for me, and I don't give that lightly.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be that high for you, but it is.
I give this book a very solid score of a B+, which it's very rare I give anything above a B. The only thing that really kept it from being A material was just the ending, and we'll get to that.
In the spoiler section.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the basic premise again. Raoden, who's the prince of this new mercantile kind of system, which is very interesting. So there's a king who's basically the king of the merchants, but then there's other merchants who keep their power based on how well they sell effectively. But he's the son of the head merchant, and he finds out he's been taken by the Raod, and he gets tossed in. That's the opening. That's your inciting incident, basically. Yep. And his main arc is just trying to figure out A, how to survive at first, and then B, how to try and make a life out of being stuck in this zombie prison effectively.
Yes, and then your deuteragonist to this would be Terrain, who is brought over from...
and who is she?
She is a princess from another country across the ocean.
And his fiancée.
She is also his fiancée. She's brought over as a political marriage.
She's a mail order bride.
Roughly, yes. I mean, she's a political marriage.
Yeah. But they seem to care for each other, because they mailed and then talked with it. They've got magic floating orbs that kind of work like magic Skype.
Yeah. But...
Force Skype. They stole that from The Force Awakens.
Okay, dial it down. So anyways... she, even though her husband has been made into an Elantrian, she still retains the status that she would have if she had married him.
Well, because they throw him off as dead politically.
Yes.
They say he's dead, he died, and then they secretly throw him in the prison. Why they didn't just actually kill him, I guess I don't really know. But because it's his son, I guess he didn't want to...
Because then we didn't have a book.
Yeah, and because it's his son, because it's the king who does this, but... He's for dead, and the contract basically states that the political marriage still goes through, even if someone dies in the middle of it, basically.
So she winds up as princess of this kingdom
with no political power, though. Basically,
no real political power, but we'll get to that.
Yes, initially.
And then she has her encounter with Hrothgar, who is our antagonist, who is this kind of warrior priest.
I really like him.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is. I liked both of these and characters, and the way they go against each other was brilliant. And I have to give Brandon Sanderson points for writing a political novel in a post-Game of Thrones climate that doesn't immediately devolve into everyone stabbing each other.
No, yeah, there's surprising... I guess the end's pretty bombastic, but like in terms of characters being assassinated to solve problems...
There is... none of that, and the one time it looks like there might be that, it isn't.
Yeah, no, it's really clever.
It is all political maneuvering, and it's all about how to neutralize your political rivals without having them murdered.
Yeah.
And
that's initially.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. It's very good, it's very intriguing, and it's very rare that you find, not just a fantasy novel, but any kind of political novel that is like that.
Well, what's also really... It's so... I talk about this a lot. My favorite things about Sanderson are his characters are very likable and his pacing is very compact. And I never, despite this being a political novel where the majority of the action is people talking.
Yes.
Like literally, I was never bored, and I bore easily.
There is almost no like physical confrontation in this book until the last few chapters.
There's like 4 fights, and then someone has a training sword fight basically in the entire book.
Pretty much.
In a...
It's an over 400 page.
Yeah, book. Like 500 something page book, and it's there are basically maybe 5 or 6 fights total.
Yep. So it's all about the intrigue, and when it's not the politics, it's Prince Raoden figuring out how he's going to survive in Elantris, which in itself is a gripping subplot.
No, it is, because it starts off and he's got nothing, and he intentionally hides his status because at first he's afraid he's going to be targeted, and then later on he goes, no, I don't want to get my status because, I don't want people to follow me. He starts becoming a leader in the city, basically, and he goes, I don't want people to follow me just because there's a prince outside. I want people to make it on their own, because that's kind of... The politics in this book are very interesting, and not what I expected. There's a very big... I don't know, what would you call it? Like teach a man to fish kind of theme in this?
Yes.
I don't know what you'd call that. I'm sure there's a stands for whatever the political view is of that, but...
It's really the theme I got about, and this harkens to another book I read that's a nonfiction piece called Toxic Charity. But it's talking about the fact that some societies tend to become dependent on acts of charity.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you see here is that, and this is kind of spoilery, but not story breaking.
I don't feel if you want nothing at this point. If you want nothing but should you go read it? Go read it. At this point, we're gonna do light spoilers and we'll do heavy spoilers later.
But part of Rowden's arc is getting the Elantrians to become self-sufficient, and at one point, someone begins bringing resources into the city to help them, and they become more dependent on those resource shipments than they do on Rowden's teachings, causing them to actually abandon how Rowden was teaching them.
Well, yeah, because they get to a point where they're starting to grow food. It's not, because again, a major theme, what motivates them is hunger. No one gives food in there, and it's very difficult for them to get food, and they finally figure out a way to start growing some crops effectively. But it's a long-term, you have to short-term pain for long-term gain, basically, is they're going to become self-sufficient. But the moment someone starts bringing short-term rewards, they're just so motivated by the immediate that they...
and that itself is a social criticism, that we live in a society that gratifies short-term, or that glorifies short-term gratification
over long-term.
If you want something, it's better to get it now as opposed to later.
Take out a huge loan to get a nice car instead of trying to that kind of a. It's really interesting, and it shows. What I love about it is it doesn't vilify. It never becomes cartoonish. It never breaks the characters or makes them feel like caricatures.
But he makes a point.
He does make a point, because the person who brings in the food is not like.
No, and they're not doing it to be malign.
No. And they feel like you're, because this is someone, whatever, I'm just, spoilers at this point. Sorry, that was quick, but no, go read the book. We're going to discuss the themes now, sorry. Because it's what's her name? Jeez. Tareen. The pronunciation on that kills me, but it's his wife, effectively, is the one who's trying to score some political points in her own, in her own kind of thing, where she's trying to maneuver and gain political power, but she's also trying to help these people. She goes, look, these people are suffering. I can score some political points and help people at the same time. I'm going to bring them food. You completely sympathize with her. She's not a villain. She's one of the protagonists. You completely buy in. You understand why she's doing it. But when you're in his perspective and see, you're like, oh my gosh, she's ruining them without even realizing it. And it feels believable. It feels not cartoonish, but it still makes a point that even well-meaning charity given the wrong way can potentially backfire. But it doesn't.
Yes.
But it never comes off as you shouldn't help people. It's saying, hey...
the point it's making is long-term ramifications, and that you can do a lot more good teaching people how to take care of themselves in the long run than you can be bringing in wagon loads of food in the short term.
Yeah. That's because I just found that very interesting. I'm not sure I've read a book that had a message like that, a fantasy book at least.
That's not a fantasy book, no, but that is actually a real world problem that happens. There are communities in third world countries that are entirely dependent on first world food aid shipments. They to the point that they no longer grow their own crops anymore. They don't make their own clothes anymore.
No, literally, my fiance. She lived as a missionary for 7 years and grew up in Thailand and Laos, specifically. And she said, you look on the reports, the GDP, Laos, their greatest source of income is foreign aid. Because they're in a position where they can't self-sustain at all. They live off of international charity. And she goes, and that's a real struggle, is because if that stops, they're dead, basically. And so she said a big part of what they were trying to do was help people learn to become a bit more self-sufficient. So it does have real world. I haven't seen that, obviously. I didn't live there, but she's like, she's telling me I've seen that,
Yeah. So. And there's the other big theme in this is church politics.
Oh man, that's
going back to the villain for a second, Hrothgar, and he has his minion Delof, and their interactions are one of the highlights of this book, because Hrothgar is just this. He is this. Really honorable guy, and he has demons in his past. He acts right, we're in spoilers now, so
we're thoroughly in spoilers. We're discussing the themes.
His whole thing is redemption, because earlier he tried to convert one country and it led to it being destroyed.
Yeah,
and so he's trying to live that down, and he doesn't want that to repeat again. He got sent to this kingdom, Arlon, to fix it, to get it to convert.
Well, he's from this society that is the church and state are the same thing.
He's from a theocratic empire.
Yes, and And so it's basically they send out the missionaries and like, hey, convert. And if people are like, no, they come break your stuff, and then you convert by force, basically. And they've taken over, at this point, a lot of the known world.
On the map, it's almost all.
Yeah, there's like 2 kingdoms left, which is part of why the political marriage happens in the first place.
Yeah.
Between Raoden and
Sorry.
Sorry. What?
Yeah, it was sorry. I said it wrong.
Okay, even said that's why I've been having trouble. Okay, jeez.
Yes, I can misread things,
no, that's
people.
Okay,
I'm not infallible.
Okay. Anyway, between those two. And it's because they're kind of the last 2 major countries that have not been taken over by the Empire. I can't remember.
Yeah, it is...
Names are not my strong suit. I only remember Raoden because I think that's a fun name. But, yeah, and so... But he genuinely cares. He's never portrayed as, again, Oh, yeah.
It is the Empire of Fjorden.
Fjorden, that's right. Very, very, almost Russian sounding, but...
Well, it's spelled with an F and a J, so I think it's meant to be Nordic sounding.
Probably, yeah. But anyway, so he's never portrayed as a cartoonist. Haha, we will take... Like, he's very loyal to the Empire, but he also cares about the people and is like, hey, I want them to convert peaceably.
Yeah. And it's... It really helps build the sympathy with the character.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know... Based on how you read his stuff, like based on his perception of things, you know that he knows bad things happen if he fails here.
Oh, yeah.
And so it adds this degree of, well, what do we do if he doesn't succeed? Because you know he can't succeed because he's the antagonist.
Yeah.
And then, but
the alternative seems really bad.
And the alternative comes in the form of his minion Deloff, who is initially this church underling, but you find out is undercover as the head of one of the biggest...
Like the secret police, basically?
One of the biggest, baddest arms. It is the Spanish Inquisition of this universe.
Like, mixed with the Nazi SS.
Yes.
He's cartoonishly evil. Yeah. Deloff is, effectively.
But... He
ended up being, like, the guy that trained him in disguise or something like that.
Yes.
He's so evil. He's like, you don't enjoy murdering people.
I like that he doesn't jump immediately to being evil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of that power play going on during the majority of the book of Hrothgar and Deloff trying to wrest power from each other non-violently.
Yeah. No, there is, because again, there's a lot of political maneuvering where Deloff seems to be trying to gain power in the little church branch that they're in, basically, and Hrothgar throughout the entire thing. I can't even say I'm drunk now, this is just me, unfortunately. Hrothgar is going, well, I got bigger fish to fry, I know he's kind of undermining my power in this little church branch, but also, if I fail, the entire country is going to get swept up.
By the way, I read that one wrong, too. It's Hrothen.
Hrothgar?
Hrothen.
Whatever. We're just going to make up names. I'm calling it Google Gobble from now on. You can tell I love smoke. Names are not my strong suit. You know that. Anyway, but...
Guys, it has been a long day after having recorded this.
It's been a long
year.
We need more alcohol.
It's only been 14 days this year.
Ooh, it's been a long year. Oh man, we may get into that when, if I ever do my 2019 review, I think I'm going to have a section about, also here is my personal life a little bit, that's why I put up 6 videos in the entire year.
Yeah.
Anyway, back on topic.
Yeah, we were saying.
But I do love, so again, this is a very political book, but it never feels, at least to me, I never felt it was preachy. Because haven't you read books where like, you feel like the characters stop, turn to the camera and go, let's talk about social economics, or something.
Yes. I have read books like that.
This does not feel like that.
No, and part of the thing is, Brandon Sanderson talked about this in one of his lectures.
Yeah.
He said, there's nothing I hate more than reading a book where there is a character, or where there's a character that is a bad guy that believes what I believe on a philosophical level, and they're made to be evil by way of having their philosophy be vilified.
Yes.
And he said... he basically was talking about how he doesn't like that and how you should do that.
No, yeah.
And it's more... Yeah, and the result is that you make something like this, which is more interesting.
Yeah. No, this is thoroughly interesting. It goes... Because, like we said, I don't ever feel like anyone... I mean, I guess it probably leans into a lot of things I tend to agree with, so I feel like a little bit unfair. I'd like to get someone who maybe disagrees with some of the ideas, and even though they're relatively safe ideas, I feel like. Maybe not entirely, but it's not like he's saying, like... I mean, like, we should help people learn to support themselves. I feel like is pretty maybe some people disagree with that. I don't feel that's a super unsafe opinion. Maybe I'm wrong though.
I don't know what's wrong with that,
but anyway, the point is, I guess the only way you could really tell if he succeeded fully in that is to get someone who did feel like their position was the bad guys. But at least from my perspective, I felt like I didn't feel like anyone was cartoonishly, because I've read books where I agree with the philosophy, and I'm rolling my eyes because I'm like, you're strong. Like, okay, I'm a Christian. I hate the God's Not Dead movies. I hate them so much.
I honestly never expected you to say that.
I hate them so much. I've only seen clips of that because I can't watch the whole thing through. But I'm like, no one believes this. Like, no, like, oh my gosh. Because there are cartoonishly evil people in the world. But just, anyway, the point is, I don't like being, what do you call it? Like when, I don't like being patronized. You know what I mean? Although, if I had a Patreon and people paid me, that'd be pretty cool. But anyway, in the story.
we'll put that down in the
ideas
ideas list.
I'll make one up. But I don't like being patronized. And so that's the closest thing I can get to, this vilifies something I believe in, is when I feel like I'm being talked down to like a child. I never felt that this way. I never felt like, oh yes, here's something you believe in. You're a good person for believing. This is like political beliefs these characters have. You watch them fight and interact.
It's not these beliefs are right, period. It's in this context, this belief works the best.
Yeah, I think it's that. It's also. I think he is making an argument for that, though, even universally. But he's not talking down to you.
It takes a backseat to the story.
That's
the key thing here. Is he's not stopping the story to preach at you. The story has this happening in the background, and you can totally ignore it and just read the story as a surface level, as a story, and it be just fine.
Yeah. No. Yeah, because we were talking about that earlier. My least favorite thing is when people stop and turn to the camera.
Yes.
And it's like, let's talk about this political issue. And it flows. I don't think anyone. The closest they get to someone doing that is, I think maybe there's half a page where Raiden just says, the people need to learn to, as long as they're depending on charity, they're going to be stuck to the whims of these people who are going to forget about them in a week. We got to get them self-sufficient. It's maybe half a page, and it feels very natural. That's the closest I can think to it stopping and preaching, and I don't think that's it at all. So I love the themes. I love how they're presented. I wish more books would bother to present their themes in such a integrated way. Because don't you ever read a book where you feel like they almost wrote the story and went, oh wait, I need to put this in, and then like they just slammed in like a page of something that just felt like it didn't belong in the book.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
You have an example?
Yes, there is. I believe it is Book 8 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen,
which you like.
Yeah, no, I like Malazan Book of the Fallen. It has its flaws, and they are many, but on the whole, I do like it. Mm-hmm. There was one scene in Book 8 where there is just you believe what you want to believe, okay? Mm-hmm. But there is a scene where pretty much one of the characters stops and basically looks at the reader and starts talking about why Christianity is wrong.
Wait, this is a fantasy world where Christianity doesn't exist.
There is like a whole straw man Christianity religion. It's Book 8 is like the lowest point of Malazan. I am not a religious man, but I felt like irked by the way it was presented in that book.
Yeah, you just
because it very much felt like Stephen Erickson was having to look at the reader and say, "This is my belief. You have to justify it to you." It was like it came off like old man shouting at the cloud level of just nonsense. Yeah. And so yeah, when that happens in a book, that's like the best case scenario of it being cringy in an otherwise okay series. If you have it happen and it's even worse than that, it can break a story.
Yeah, dude. See, this is why, because what's coming up next, this is foreshadowing for Mistborn, though. Because I'm going to say it now. One of my least favorite things about Mistborn, which is a series I love, and we're going to get to that, that's Mistborn 1's next after we finish this, is the third book, which I've told you about this. This isn't major spoilers. Yeah. A solid third of that book, really closer to a half, is one of the characters sitting and contemplating all the different fictional religions in this book. And then he comes to the conclusion that belief itself is just like it's, again, it wouldn't be fine if he has this private revelation that builds into his character. you know, and it was kind of like a, you know, but like, I'm not kidding. There's a third of this book dedicated to this. It is a major theme. And he goes, you know what? Maybe the real religion were the friends we made along the way. And the same author, so he's not perfect. I don't even know if he's trying to preach what he believes, but it just felt so ham-fisted. What's interesting is he actually said, well, I went to the original book and I didn't feel like it had enough of this character in it. So I went back in and added these scenes of him contemplating a religion, and it feels like it. So,
I'm sure we're going to have this discussion again in
I know,
greater
so I won't stay on it. But the point is, even this author does a little bit of that later. I've seen worse, but here it's done so masterfully, where the themes just intertwine with the characters. Doesn't feel forced. I don't feel talked down to. I don't feel talked up to. Like, yeah, your beliefs are great. It just feels like these are characters with beliefs. You watch them interact in the story. They unfold in really believable, natural, and interesting ways, and the way they all play off of each other is endlessly entertaining, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the ending some?
Okay, well, I gotta say this about the ending.
Mega spoilers now at this point.
Yeah, okay, so now we were talking about the de facto ending. So, when I first picked up this book, I picked it up under the assumption that it was going to be a standalone. And, yeah, and by that bout of maniacal laughter, you can tell I was very, very wrong. That was another really big issue with this book for me, is that this very much sets up for an Elantris 2 and 3.
Yeah.
That just kind of bothered me that he left a bunch of things hanging, and it would have been okay if I knew that there was going to be an Elantris 2 at some point in the near future.
It's been 15 years.
Yes, but it's been 15 years since this was published.
All right, I'm going to break something to you. Now that I've got you sucked in, you want to read more Sanderson books, right? You're still enjoying them?
Yes.
Okay, so I got you in. Now I'm going to tell you the dark secret of Sanderson. He has never ended a series.
Oh my god.
He has never ended a series.
Holy crap.
No,
right.
not one. Because he ends the Mistborn trilogy, and I'm like, gosh, that's really disappointing. There's a lot left hanging open. He goes, that's because I'm setting up for the sequel Mistborn trilogy. This isn't actually the end. This just leads into the next one.
Mistborn 2. Mistborn Harder.
No, yeah. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's a little weird, but fine. And then, like, there's this sci-fi series that I like. It's kind of YA. It's not the most, but it's good fun. It's simple fun, called the Reckoners. And that one ends, and I'm like, oh, that's a really weird and kind of disappointing ending that feels like it leaves asks a lot more questions than it ends. He goes, that's because I'm setting up for my sequel series in the sci-fi universe. And then The Way of Kings, everyone ends, and it goes, actually, this is connecting to another series. He has never ended a series. Every single series end, I'm doing big air quotes, you can't see, but series end, is just a setup for a sequel series. He's never ended one, ever, in his 15 plus years of professional writing. Love it, and I want more Sanderson, that's great, but eventually he's going to die, and we're going to have 27 series going. So that is the dark secret of Sanderson, is that there are no series ends, just cliffhangers for the next one.
The joke we made on Discord, you said Randy Randerson.
Oh,
that sounds like you just said that in conversation, and I was like, that sounds like the name of a defective Brandon Sanderson clone that writes fan fiction.
Yeah.
Now, in my headcanon, Tor Books' basement has a cloning facility full of Brandon Sandersons that are in various stages of development, so that when he dies, they turn the lights on and bring the next one out. But yeah, they put this in place to protect their highest selling authors after they lost Robert Jordan, who sadly died before they could complete the cloning process.
But then they just got Brandon Sanderson is a failed Robert Jordan clone.
Or successful.
No. He failed because if he had actually been a clone of Robert Jordan, we would
know what it looks
like. So he actually writes books we like.
I guess that depends on how you define failure and success. All right. I think we have fully derailed ourselves.
Okay, but the ending. So it solves the conflict of the book, I think, fairly conclusively.
It does
not resolve the conflict of the world and series.
Yeah, and it throws in, hey, by the way, there's 2 more magic systems going on.
And then there's more than that.
Yeah, and
little spin-offs.
Yeah, spin-offs that I haven't read yet.
They're good. Well, one of them is.
And then there is the version I have, which happens to also be the 10th anniversary edition. After the epilogue, there's a quick scene with Hoyd at the end.
We get used to those. Those are in every book.
Those are in every book?
Yeah, every book.
Oh, wonderful.
Doesn't matter the series. It's just every Sanderson. Hoyt is his.
Oh, I know, he's supposed to be the jackass that's hopping from planet to planet.
Yeah, basically. He can go forward in time in weird ways, but not backwards also, so he also time travels a little bit.
Okay.
He can jump forward like hundreds of years. It's not really clearly explained. Also, he may be literally older than the age of the universe.
Okay. More on that as we uncover details.
But yeah, so they added in a little thing where Hoyt's like, I love adventure, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I can you explain it better than that? Like, I feel like...
Yeah, it's basically... there's some discussion on their little glowing spheres. They're called Aeons.
Aeons, yeah, that's another magic system. There's a lot of magic systems in this world.
Yeah. But on the whole, despite its flaws, Elantris is a very solid book. If you haven't read it, read it. If you have read it, read it again.
I couldn't agree more. I love this book. It's a great place to start. I think it's a great place to start Sanderson, even though if you want a sequel.
Yes, I would say, despite the stuff at the ending, it is a very good starting off point.
Yeah, I feel it's fairly. You don't need to know a lot about the wider universe, because unfortunately, as you get into more of these, I'm glad you're reading them. The order they're coming out. Because a lot of people go, I want to start with Way of Kings, and that's great. Also, like a third of Way of Kings is just hints, nods, and crossovers with the other books that you will not get if you haven't read the other books. So, well, that's the thing. I know we're getting on the top. Of course, I'm going to do that. But Way of Kings is my least favorite series of his.
And here come the angry comments.
I'm not saying it's bad. It's my least favorite of his, though. But I have to read it because it's his Avengers. Now, it's not quite that crossover-y, but, like, literally a main... I guess you're a protagonist even if you're evil, if you're a point of view character, whatever. A main character from one of my other favorite series just shows up and ends up becoming an important... Like at the end of book 2, someone from Warbreaker just flipping shows up. It's like, hi, I'm here. And throughout all of book 3, he's just like wreaking havoc and stuff and causing trouble. And it's like, there hasn't been a Warbreaker sequel equal. That's another thing you'll get to. And so I'm like, well, I want to find out what happened to those characters, so I gotta read Way of Kings now. So yeah, everything's interconnected. The best thing about Brandon Sanderson is his worlds are wonderfully interconnected, and you get lots of rewards for reading all the books. The worst thing about Brandon Sanderson is that all of his worlds are interconnected, and you can't. But this is a great jumping on point. I think it's fairly easy to just jump into. It's very different from a lot of fantasy books. It's a little bit political, but it's very interesting. If you're a little bit bored of kind of Tolkien ripoffs, I think this is a great, refreshing change of pace.
Or if you want a political story that isn't Game of Thrones, this is a very good one.
Or talking down to you. I'd also say that. I don't know how much Game of Thrones talks down to you or not, but I don't think it really does that, but I don't know.
Game of Thrones doesn't talk down to you. George R. R. Martin does. I have no respect for that man. Flame me in the comments.
I don't know. I haven't read it, so I read the first summary of the first book, and I was like, I don't think it's gonna be for me. But this is a good jumping off point. Our next book is also a pretty good jumping off point.
And that is Mistborn: The Final Empire.
Yes, which is the first book. To confuse everyone, The Final Empire is the first book. So why don't I summarize this one started off? Why don't you summarize a bit of the Final Empire?
So, Mistborn is set approximately, I believe it's 1,000 years after the Dark Lord, who has named himself Lord Ruler, and you're going to see my lisp just make fun of that tonight.
No!
Lord Ruler has taken control over the entire world because the heroes assumedly failed to stop him.
I guess he's taken over the world.
The known world.
Okay,
we'll establish it as that, the known world.
There's some weird stuff happens in later sequels, but yeah.
But,
most of his stuff's centered around a city, though, even though he's taken over the world. And they do mention his other territories, but he's kind of consolidated most of known humanity into this gigantic city. So
he has this massive capital city called Luthadel, where his big fortress is located. And in the streets of Luthadel, there are lots of thieves.
Yes.
And so one intrepid thief named Kelsier is going around recruiting a team of that's basically fantasy Ocean's 11.
Oh yeah, no, it's
a
heist fantasy book.
That are going to go in and they are going to steal all the Lord Ruler's money, and in doing so,
that'll stop him.
Yeah, in doing so, they will be able to that will cause his armies to not be loyal anymore.
Basically bribe.
Yeah, bribe the armies away, and they will depose him. Yeah.
They basically say this guy's basically a walking demigod, even more so than the Elantrians. I think that's fair to say. The Elantrians are pretty strong. This dude is effectively immortal. Nothing seems to be able to harm him, as you see later. And so they're like, well, we can't beat him in a fight. They're like, maybe we can contain him. That's kind of thrown around at one point.
And that's actually something I liked. Is it's like, we're not going to beat him by fighting him. We're just going to beat him by refusing to fight him.
Yeah. And so they're like, well, we can't win in a fight, so let's try. It's again kind of a political thing, either less maybe intellectual. But they're like, okay, we're not going to beat him in a fight. Let's steal his resources, because even one dude against the entire, maybe he can wipe out all humanity. But then what are you Lord Ruler of?
Yeah.
So he's I don't want to say benevolent, but what's interesting about him is he's effectively the bad guy that won. At least he's framed that way.
Yes.
But he's got kind of a society going on. He's not like randomly going out in the streets and killing people. Basically, he's got a little bit of a semi-functioning society.
No, he's very much that bad guy that wanted their evil empire, and now he has it.
Yeah.
And now he's ruling it, and well,
kind of disinterested almost.
Yeah, because it turns out ruling an empire kind of sucks. Because when you make an empire, people want to take it away from you.
Yeah.
Even if they're just thieves in the streets.
Yeah, and so Kelsier is kind of the driving force of the plot, even though he's not the POV character.
Kelsier really is more of a deuteragonist, but it's his actions that are what really sets the novel in motion most of the time.
It's mostly his story through the eyes of Vin, I feel like. She has her own arc, but I feel like the big player things that happen are mostly set in place by Kel. That changes as the series goes on, as you'll find out, but in this book it is very much... He's the one making the big plays.
Yeah, and so our actual protagonist, by the way, is Vin.
Yes.
Who is a teenage girl who finds out that she has magic.
Yeah,
and she is a member of a thieving crew, and she gets found by Kelsier, and under his tutelage learns how to use various forms of magic with the intent of becoming a master thief.
You know what's interesting is we didn't even touch on the magic in Elantris, because I guess we talked about the zombie sickness basically, but...
It's because the magic in Elantris wasn't really that critical to solving the plot.
It isn't, but because I was going to say, I want to talk about Allomancy, which is the main magic system in Mistborn.
Oh, yes, there was a lot to talk about with the magic system in this.
So I just find it interesting that, to me, the magic is very... It's fun in its background flavor, and it does play into the plot, but, like, we didn't even really feel like we needed to mention... I want to talk about Allomancy, though, in Mistborn. So, magic in this world is really fun. It's one of... I think it's... Let me think. I think it's my favorite hard magic system. Off the top of my head, it's my favorite hard magic system. Of course, I also know a little bit. Part of that's because of sequel stuff. Sorry, but it's very specific. Do you want to talk about that some, or you want me to, or what do you want to do?
Yes. So, because I only want to talk about Allomancy in the context of this book.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying I'm trying to leave that.
So, Allomancy.
In this book.
In this book, you have two types of people that can use Allomancy: Mistings and Mistborns.
Yes.
And a Misting has 1 power, a Mistborn has all 8.
Now, yeah, I was going to say there's
and
8.
it is implied that maybe there are more. You determine what power you have based upon what metal you can ingest and burn.
Yes.
And different metals do different things. So, for example, there are Mistings that are called either pewter arms or thugs, which burn pewter, and it makes them incredibly powerful, like incredibly physically strong and fit.
They get stronger, faster, can run...
They have better balance.
Yeah.
It improves their musculature completely.
Yes.
But a Mistborn can do all 8 or more regardless.
Yeah.
Each of these metals that a Mistborn can ingest has one specific purpose. And so it's all about most of the conflicts that happen are about how Vin combines certain metals together.
Well, and how much you have, too.
Yeah, and how much you have. In order to overcome an obstacle.
Because there are one of my favorite things about this is, Sanderson says this, but basically is limits on your magic are more interesting than what they can do almost. And in this book, I feel that's very evident because it's like, one of the powers is the ability to push metal.
Yeah.
So you initially, if I just say that, you think, oh, Magneto, basically. But it's very different.
No, it's all vector dynamics.
Yeah, so it's like, you can only push in a direct line basically from your center mass out. You cannot push things heavier than you are, or you go flying, which is used in interesting ways. What else? You can only push if you have enough metal to do it as well. I'm trying to think of what the other limits are. There's a few other things like that, but you have to have a semi line of sight.
Yeah.
Because of the blue lines, you
And there are unintentional limits too. Like at one point, they blind someone towards the final the final fight by throwing a handful of metal in his face, and the blue lines that tell him where the metal is just completely fill his field of view.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. And every single power has interesting limitations like that. Like if you overuse the pewter too much, it has like really bad effects on you. And then I know this is slightly getting into this, but in this trilogy, tin eyes basically, the people that can hear and it increases your senses. That when that gets abused, really interesting thing happen there. What happens to your senses has permanent lasting damage. So you can also overuse these powers, and there's a lot of hard limitations on these, which make the fights a lot more dynamic, interesting. I want to say intellectual even, because it's not like love Star Wars. It's not like two people using the Force pushing rocks at each other. It's like, okay, you're pushing that metal at me, so I'm going to push it at this angle, which is going to knock me off balance, but then I'll push myself off of this other metal, and all this is happening.
Or maybe I'll pull over here.
Yeah, because you can also pull from here, but then push at this at the same time. Or I think someone tries to push her at one point, and she like ends up pushing against something on this end and pulling something else at this at the same time to balance herself.
Yeah, or there's a scene at the beginning, or towards the beginning, where Kelsier's fighting a bunch of guys, and he pulls a piece of metal from behind one of them, hits him in the back of the head, and kills him instantly.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
You have to be careful too, because it's like someone threw something and she tries to pull it early on and doesn't really know how to handle it, and she's like basically sending a metal object directly towards her chest, and it's like, oh crap, has to jump out of the way to avoid. And they use it to like do these giant kind of Hulk-ish leaps, because they push off of metal at an angle to leap far distances, and they have these like kind of railroady things where they have metal that's specifically set to push yourself hopping, from city to city, or parts of the city basically, effectively. It's really, and that's only scratching the tip of the iceberg on all this stuff can do.
Yes, it's a very, very cool magic system, and I was very impressed with it.
Is it his best? It's one of his best, at least. It's really good. But all that is still, and my favorite thing is it doesn't get too bogged down in it. It's fun, but it's not what the story's about.
No,
it's not Harry Potter learning magic.
It came off very fluidly integrated into the story.
Because the real part of the story, as much fun as the magic is, and we love talking about it, the real arc of the story is Kelsier's attempt to overthrow the Lord Ruler, and Vin basically learning to trust. It's a little bit, it's not quite that sappy, but...
Because Vin, she spent her whole life basically being abused and used and abused. So her whole personal journey in this story is learning how to come out of that shell that she's encased herself in, and learning how to trust other people.
Surprisingly personal story for something like this, I feel like, at least.
Yeah, fairly personal, definitely.
And you said some downside to that is you felt like it got a little too sappy at some points.
I wouldn't say
you were
sappy,
afraid it was going to head in that direction?
There were some moments where some red flags went off in my head where I thought it was going to get sappy, but it didn't.
It rode the line carefully.
It rode the line very carefully, because when you're writing the whole, they came out of their shell story, that just... I've said it before in this podcast, so I'll say it again. I'm a very cynical man. I'm a very bitter person. So it's very easy for me to read something like that and to just roll my eyes and stay cold inside. But no, it was actually executed very well here. So I was taken with it. I could believe her personal journey. It felt like she had earned it.
Yeah, it does, because I think the climax of that is... We're in heavy spoilers for this too now. But whatever.
Spoilers, happy gone.
Yeah, okay. But the climax of that is basically when Ellen and Sazed come for her at the very end, basically. Sazed comes initially, and then Ellen also comes to kind of be... I guess we haven't talked about who Ellen is. You should know, we're spoilers, but... she has to... Her whole mission during this giant plan is to basically... She can pass as a young noble lady. And she's effectively a spy in noble society, because she's the only one who isn't like a known criminal. Because I guess she was a pickpocket, but the others are really high-profile criminals.
Yeah.
And are needed elsewhere, and she's kind of like a spy, basically. And she ends up falling for this boy who's kind of an idealistic... A lot of political stuff, now that I think about it. He's like, we're going to change the systems incrementally from the inside. We'll just get the demon god king to, like... give people fairer wages, because it's a dystopic future where like most of the people are like basically slave labor.
Yes.
And then there's people who are like barons, the whole world is crap. Also, it's filled with ash and everything's just bad. It is the dystopic future, and he's just like, we'll just like try and get higher wages for our slaves when we take over. We'll beat them twice less a day. Like, he's a good kid, but he's very much a product of the system he's in.
His heart is in the right place. You can tell his heart's in the right place, but at the same time, he's bogged down by all the pseudo philosophy of his own society.
Yes. Well, do you remember the part of I love something they? I'm gonna get real for a second.
Yeah.
Something I love about this book is it is very honest about how flawed people from who are in a society like this can be without he never feels vilified. He's a person to be pitied when he's off about things. But I love the moment where he's talking about something and Vin lets it slip, like, oh, Ascad and blah, blah, blah. Ascads are with the slave.
Yeah, they're the slave caste.
And he's like, oh my gosh, Ascads are that smart? Like, they could think that. They have, like, emotions, basically. They're people. And he's, like, fascinated. And it reminds me so much of letters that were found by George Washington, right? Who, by all accounts for his time, was a pretty moral, upstanding dude. He owned slaves, though, right?
Yes.
There's a bunch of letters about him going, like, I just don't get it. I provide them. It's horrible looking back now, but he's like, I give them fair lodgings. We don't beat them. They keep running away. I don't understand. And near the end of his life, he said, I get it. But at the very end of his life, there's some letters where he goes, I get it now. I just was so bogged down with this is how things have always been. People want to be free. It doesn't matter if you give them comfort. People want to be free. But anyway, Elend reflects that in fiction so well, where he's a good-hearted guy, but is so brought up in the system that he can't understand that, like, also slaves don't want to be slaves.
And that's kind of just the tragedy of his character.
Yeah.
Is that he's just so far removed from other humans that he can't even see they're human.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because he has no clue. Vin passes as a noblewoman because she's got the magic powers. Effectively. Yeah. She's a Mistborn. And
does Elend even have magic powers? I don't think he's ever... In book 1, he never even uses them.
Does he? No, I don't think he has powers. I don't think he does.
So it's not even magic powers that separates them. It's just whoever's dressed nice and who isn't.
Yeah, no, it's just he's part of the noble society. I don't think he has... Does he? Because the other thing is, to get the magic powers, you have to go through something traumatic. So he has the potential for magic, potentially. Because you have to remember, you have to snap.
Yeah, because they talk about the snapping.
You have to snap, which is so you can have the potential for magic powers, and then you have to go through something very traumatic. It's very X-Men-esque. You go through puberty, and then you get your superpower.
It's funny you said X-Men because you said snap, and I was immediately thinking about Avengers Infinity War.
Yeah. But anyway, so he has the potential for magic, but
we're dorks if you couldn't tell.
But I don't think he uses any or has the ability to use it at this point, at least. Hands up for the future. But what I also love is it never feels, again, we're going back to, it never feels shoved down your throat, but I love the power dynamic between them. Because she's like a super powered, like, super soldier, and he's just like a pretty boy with some books, basically. No, for real. Like, you know, she's
I'm laughing about how on the nose you are with that.
It's really, it doesn't feel like, like, nothing about this feels like, you were talking about one of your least favorite tropes earlier.
Yeah.
Is, again, huge air quotes, strong female characters who aren't, they're just blank slates, basically, right? They're like, Master Chief of boobs.
Yeah.
Vin does not feel like that.
No, she feels like an actual person.
Yes. Almost too characters. She's too savvy, almost. But I love one of the interesting power dynamics, because again, she is like, she could kill Ellen 15 ways from Sunday with her superpowers, and she's got super training, and he's a pretty boy with books.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting, but almost power dynamic, because he's so confident in his own skin, and she is so not confident in hers.
Yeah. And there's a big, confidence makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference in confidence between the two characters is how well it's written.
Yeah, and he's not like abusive, but like you can tell he kind of takes charge of a lot of conversations and is very forward and playing the political game very well that she's very bad at initially. And it's just interesting to watch this character who's like, again, like a walking assassin, weapon, feel completely at ease with a pretty boy with books because he's more comfortable in high society, effectively, at least initially. She gets better at it. But
yeah.
That also evolves as the things go on, and that's very interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that on later podcasts.
So, big pros, big cons for you on this.
So, pros was definitely the magic system. Mm-hmm. It was the characters and the plot. the biggest con for me was, again, the ending.
Well, in defense, this is book 1 of a trilogy.
Yeah, now I give this one leeway because it's book 1 of a trilogy.
And the second one came out a few years later.
Yeah.
Or a year later or something.
When they do fight and defeat Lord Ruler, it was extremely anticlimactic, especially since a handful of chapters before that, Kelsier is fighting one of the Lord Ruler's minions, a creature called a Steel Inquisitor.
And that's a better final boss.
And it was an amazing, amazing acrobatic fight between two people with magic. Though, and after he beats the Steel Inquisitor, and he's staring down the Lord Ruler, who has been stabbed through the chest twice from behind, and treats it like a mild inconvenience, pulls the spear out of him, and impales Kelsier with it. And you can have no better build-up than that.
Yeah.
And to see that just...
cheats.
Yeah, she just cheats.
So she basically has... So one of the rules of the magic system is you can't pull metal from someone that's ingrained in their skin.
Yeah.
So if you have piercings, you can't pull those out. But then she does.
Yeah, she yanks his bracers off and he dies. Because he was using, and this was actually another pros, the second magic system.
Yeah.
Because it turns out there's more than one in this.
Yeah. And so he's found an interesting way to combine magic systems, because he actually, I don't know if they explain this in the first book, but it's the very beginning of the second.
They do talk about it towards
epilogue
the end. It's one of the chapters before the epilogue.
Okay.
Where they do talk about how he was combining Allomancy and the other magic system, Feruchemy, to basically render himself effectively immortal.
So there's weird interactions between the two magic systems. When they combine, there's something basically explained. There's a much more complicated, because he's got a really, again, this is hard magic, but the short version is when Allomancy and Feruchemy combine and you do them, instead of multiplying, they grow in exponents, basically. So instead of it being like 2 to the power of 6, or instead of 2 times 6, it's 2 to the power of 6, effectively. And so the healing isn't just, doubled or tripled. It's like to the power of 10. It's like to the power of 10 or something like that. So that's what rendered him.
And he was storing up all that, because Feruchemy allows you to store up things and then use it as a later date. And he was basically storing up...
exchange.
He was basically using Allomancy to store up power, to make himself more powerful, and then storing all of that power so he could draw upon it whenever he needed it to be young again.
Yeah.
So he was he could basically self-perpetuate his own immortality.
I think it was something like he had to be old for 3 hours every month, and then he can be perpetually young the rest of because of the way that it's...
Yeah, it was something like that, because towards the end, Ven tries to, when she's trying to assassinate him, she breaks into his chambers, and she finds him as an old man. It's like, this is not the Lord Ruler.
Yeah.
But it was, because he was at that one moment where he was vulnerable.
Yeah. And so it's really... the ending. But anyway, so yeah, basically she just cheats. They say, you can't pull metal out of people, and then she just does. Yes. Which is explained later, but it does feel a little anticlimactic in that book.
I'm just talking about this book in the context of itself. So you will have to wait.
I got opinions. I love this trilogy, obviously, but whoo boy, this is the best. Well, the second one may have the best ending. Define best. The ending of the second one is a riot. Because it's about Zane. And I know how you feel about Zane.
We'll talk about Zane when we do the Well of Ascension podcast.
For me, the things I like about this book the most, shock and awe, characters and pacing, I love. I really like some of the sappy stuff, actually. Maybe just because I'm sap, but like, Kelsier's... Kelsier gives me the goosebumps. He gives me the creeps, actually. A lot of people like him. I keep waiting for his ghost to show back up as, like, a villain. Like, I know that sounds crazy, and that's not a spoiler for anything. Like, I don't know, but, like, legitimately, I just keep waiting for something he's done to him, because the entire first book is nothing but red flags about Kelsier, like, really doing some shady stuff, basically.
Well, I recall Brandon Sanderson once saying that Kelsier was meant to basically, in any other novel, be a bad guy.
Yeah.
But in the context of this one novel, because he's so evil, he's willing, it makes him the perfect good guy to beat an even worse bad guy.
Yeah, nothing, as far as I've read, nothing has come out that's like, the ramifications of what he did have led to worse evil than the Lord Ruler or anything like that. because I've read the sequel series for it, and Kelsier's, everyone's a legendary hero at that point, basically, so there are ramifications, but, like, I keep waiting for it to be like, also, I don't know, like, I guess he's probably dead, maybe he comes back, or, like, something he did inspired a terrorist, or, something like that. I keep waiting for that, because the flags on him basically setting himself up to be, like, a villain are so hard, that it's, like, legitimately, if he hadn't died at the end of this book, you would have expected book 3 to be about, Kelsier's the bad guy now, we gotta take him down. It's flagged so hard.
He became the monster he
it feels like
and
it.
there is a moment towards the end where he gets, like, John Wick levels of angry.
Oh, yeah.
When he finds out... so Kelsier has his brother Marsh go undercover.
Marsh is maybe my favorite character in that.
Marsh is pretty awesome. He goes undercover in the Lord Ruler's Inquisition, and
which involves getting nails jammed into your eyes.
So he gets assumed killed. He is assumed killed in action at one point.
Oh, yeah.
And Kelsier just gets mad, and he leaves a trail of bodies
of semi-innocent people.
Yes. All the way to the mines where the Lord Ruler is getting his stuff, and he destroys them single-handedly because he's just pissed.
Yeah, and again, I say semi-innocent because these are people in the system, perpetuating the system, which is a terrible system of enslaving people, but they're also, like, what is the in their minds, because they're in the system, what is the alternative for them?
They were born into it, and they know nothing else.
And what are you going to do, rebel against the guy who can just shrug off spear strikes and is, almost like, is semi a literal deity?
Yeah.
Like, so you feel sympathy. It's not that they're good guys, but you feel some sympathy because it's like, again, it goes back to the Washington thing where you feel, at least I do, I feel like, hey, Washington's a great man. He was also in the system that was like, hey, here's slaves. That doesn't make him less of a great man, but it also doesn't excuse the evil of him being a slave owner. What? You look like you got something to say.
Nothing.
No, I was just going to say, so that, at least that's how I feel. I feel like, again, Sanderson's portraying them sympathetically without apologizing for also these are really bad, horrible, awful things. But you feel, I at least felt for the nobles, where it's like, you see a lot of them as vain and evil and unlikable, but then you see a lot of them who are just kind of stuck there and like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I'm part of the system. I'd rather be here than down there, but it's not like I could change it. Ellen's the closest thing to like someone who wants to fight the system, and he's like, we'll beat them twice a day. And that Vin does change his mind as these people are opened up to the reality of reality, you do watch them change and realize, oh, holy crap, we were enslaving people.
Yeah.
But it's never it never felt like there's the cartoon. It felt real, I guess. It felt like how real people deal with real, just evil systems of power and like, just it sucks you in and warps your mind,
Yeah, no, I believe the adage is power corrupts.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the traditional definition of corrupt, it still corrupts. It changes how you view things.
Yeah. And it's portrayed very sympathetically, believably, without apologizing for it, I guess. So that was an aspect of the book I like.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I got sidetracked off of what I was originally going to say, which is, despite Kelsier scaring the absolute crap out of me, he really makes me nervous. I keep waiting. I know that's dumb, but in the Sanderson book, like, there could be wide-reaching effect because everything's connected. I keep waiting for them to, in friggin', what is it, The Way of Kings, to be like, oh yes, here's the cult of Kelsier that's coming through the gates and is gonna slaughter everyone. I don't know. I keep waiting for that. But anyway, one thing I loved was his loyalty to his dead wife, who presumably betrayed him.
Yeah.
There's a line
that was genuinely heartrending. That he's committed to this woman because in a way it's like he has nothing else.
No, yeah. I love there's a line that's like, but she betrayed you, and he goes, that doesn't mean I still don't love her, or something like that. And I was like, ouch. Yeah. I felt small pangs of that, where there's that, like, when someone you love, it doesn't have to be romantically, like, just, I'm sure all of us have had family members that, we trusted too much or something like that, or let us down, and it was like, you still love them even though they didn't treat you right,
Yeah. That's a very real
thing. And it can be much smaller things. I've not, betrayed.
Yeah. And it was a very humanizing thing to see added on to Kelsier.
Yeah. We'll say, slight... I don't mind her being vindicated, but the way they do it's a little like, also, she wasn't evil!
Yeah, it was kind of clunky.
it's a little quicken in the background. Like the Lord Ruler, that is one, but the Lord Ruler stops is like, yes, and you thought your wife betrayed you. And she's like, oh, your wife didn't betray you. And he's like, my wife didn't betray me. Oh, I've been stabbed. Like that's
because the Lord Ruler has to take time to remember that one dude's wife.
Yeah, well, it's also weird because the reason they think he betrayed her is also the Lord Ruler just kind of says stuff and they really read too much into it.
Yeah.
Because the Lord Ruler,
which granted, I can see that when you're dealing with like a deity. I guess you'd be inclined to read into it. You could be like, I want lunch on Tuesday, and
Tuesday is the holy
yes. So I can. That's a very extreme example, but I can see that. I can see him like just totally fabricating that whole thing in his head, basically off of what was otherwise an offhanded statement.
Yeah, I love how few craps the Lord Ruler cares. On his death floor, he just never cares.
He is bleeding out on the floor. He's just like, oh well.
Yeah, he's just like, you're a moron. Because there's that threat. He's like, you don't even understand what I've done for you guys. He's like, whatever. And then there's, I don't think it's too much as a spoiler. In Secret History, you see 5 seconds of his ghost because of shenanigans, basically. And his ghost goes, whatever. And then just pass it. Like, literally. They see his ghost and he shows up and they're like, oh my gosh, it's the Lord Ruler. And he goes, I tried. And just, like, walks off and leaves and goes into bed. It's like, it's so great. He's just constantly characterized as just this guy that just does not give a flying flip. And it makes
1,000 years of ruling the Empire does that to you.
But yeah, so I think it's a good place to start off as well. For what do you think? This or Elantris if you gotta recommend someone to start?
Honestly, I think this one might be a better starting off point than Elantris, just because you have that safety net of there being the 2 sequels just for the first trilogy.
But it doesn't end.
And I know it doesn't end, and that's the problem.
You have more material to read at least.
I mean, if you're like me and you don't like the dangling plot threads, then Elantris' ending is going to irk you until we get into Elantris 2. But in either case, both books are very good.
What's your rating? You gave that Elantris a B+.
I gave Elantris a B+. I give Mistborn a flat A.
Oh, wow!
Yeah,
okay.
I give it a flat
Hot
A.
Dang! I'm surprised. I would have thought you liked Elantris more. Is it because you know there's sequels?
It was because I knew there was going to be follow-up material to it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, that was part of it.
Okay, yeah.
Because if I can get to the end of one book and go, that was a little unsatisfying, but there's a books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 coming, I can forgive that.
Yeah.
If I get to the end of one book and it's been 15 years since it's published and nothing, I'm not going to be forgiving.
So that's interesting. So if you had read, if there's a world where 2 and 3 exist, does the grade go up, or does he still get docked point because it took him 15 years to get back to it, or? I'm just curious.
That would depend on when I read them.
So if you had read them after these had
if 2 and 3 were out at the time that I had finished Elantris, that probably would have affected the score to an A, assuming that 2 and 3
were decent,
were at least decent.
Yeah,
if not better than 1. So
that's really interesting to me.
That's kind of just how my brain works.
No, I totally get it though. I'm mostly the same way. I give Elantris a. Themes are like the biggest deal to me, which is dumb. Characters and themes, and I love the ones in Elantris, so I kind of forgive it that it doesn't end. I've also just accepted. Yeah. Elantris was not the first Sanderson book I read, so at that point I realized,
he doesn't finish anything.
He doesn't finish books. So I just was kind of prepared for it. I was like, I'm just using... Because 3, I think, is my... Your Elantris was my Mistborn 3, because I got to the end of it and I was like, this isn't an ending. I just read an entire trilogy. Imagine that Elantris feeling, but magnified by 3, because you read a whole trilogy and then it didn't end.
Oh, the Hero of Ages podcast is probably going to be messy then.
But by then you'll have accepted he doesn't have endings, so it won't hit you quite as hard. But I was like, the other thing is, I didn't know a sequel trilogy was coming out initially. So I finished it and I was like, what the heck? Because you at least know there's eventually supposed to be an Elantris 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Because you're like, this is...
Oh, he talks about it on his website, but it's been 15 years, so
I didn't know there was going to be a Mistborn 4. So I finished Mistborn 3, and I'm like, the heck? I'm like, this is... I really need to reread it, because that negative, sour taste of this feels so unfinished. Not like it's like the story is concluded, but there's so many dangling plot threads left open for sequels, which is great because I like sequels. And I have such a love-hate relationship because 3 ended and I'm like, I'm so mad this didn't end. It felt so inconclusive. I poured so much time. And then also the sequel trilogy has been the sequel is 4 books. He's written 3 of them, but the first 3 of the next has been my favorite of his work. So I feel so torn because I just wanted it to end, but also it not ending has produced my favorite of his work. But I know, the thing is, I'm going to get torn because I know the 4th book's going to come out. It's not going to end.
It's going to set up for the Mistborn 1980s that he talks about.
Well, what's insane is this wasn't even supposed to exist. It was supposed to be a one-off, like, interquel, basically. Because he's like, oh yeah, I want to do the 80s next. And he's like, I'll just write a fun little cowboy side story. And we've been here for, like, not 15 years, but, like, 7 or something like that. And then the other thing that's terrible is he finished... Sorry, I know we're ranting. We gotta wrap this up soon. But it's related. I gotta get this out. This is the only place I can get this out. Let me finish. Okay, so then he writes 4. Great! Like, really pretty quickly. Right as soon as I finished... The thing is... I think there was a gap. But for me, I finished 3. And right as I finished 3, I'm like, this sucks. There's no ending. And they're like, oh yeah, 4's coming out next year. And I'm like, oh! Okay, all's forgiven. So I wait a year. For me. And then 5 comes out the next year. And then 6 comes out the same next year. Like, not year. So he's like 1, bam, bam. Like, it was the beginning of the end of the year. Like, these are just piling out. I'm like, this is awesome. We were, like, kicking it. That was, like, 2015 or 16. And then I'm like, he's like, wrote the first 3 of this 4-book series. And then it's been 5 years, and he won't write the gosh danged last book.
He's still got to keep making Stormlight books.
Well, yeah, so he's like, that's what killed me. He's like, I'm going to take a break from everything else and just finish Stormlight. I'm like, no! The one series I just think is okay, which again is my favorite. It's fine, but
don't worry, Stormlight will have its day soon.
I'm just like, no! The one series, so he's like, I'm going to stop writing your favorite series and leave it right at the end so I can go write Stormlight. But I am suspicious, based on events in that book, that basically the end of this series is going to spoil whatever the frick is happening in Stormlight. So I think that's why he's doing it, so it doesn't spoil. Because again, like I told you, at one point in the sequel series, they look up in the sky and they're like, oh look! That looks like the Stormlight world! Why does it look like all the suns are exploding? There's a giant red evil light emanating dark magic! Wonder what that means! And I'm like, oh.
Somebody messed up.
Yeah, so it's like, ooh, because this is slightly in the future.
Anyway. Damn it, Kaladin, you had one job.
Yeah, we gotta get to that. So overall, big recommends for both of us?
Yes.
Who is this for? Who is this not for?
Honestly, I'd say this is just for people that like fantasy.
Both of them?
Yeah, I'd say both of them.
Yeah. I think Elantris...
If you like fantasy and you want something that you can point at and say, you know what, this is unique and there's not really anything like it, this is your go-to, definitely.
My one caveat is, especially with Elantris, I feel like Mistborn's pretty digestible. Maybe if you want a fantasy book, you can kind of turn your brain off. And I don't necessarily mean that as an insult, but like, we've all watched shows. We don't read that much like that, but we watch shows where sometimes like, I just need to veg.
Yeah.
Elantris doesn't veg well, in my opinion. You kind of got to keep up with what's going on a little bit.
Yeah, there's a bunch of moving pieces in Elantris, but I mean, for me, that wasn't a problem.
Me either. Yeah. But no, we sound so smart. I'm smart enough.
Oh, we're so highbrow with the bourbon sitting here talking about fantasy novels.
I don't mean that to, but like, because I've read books and I've talked to people who like, I read fantasy to just kind of turn my brain off and just enjoy. This is not that kind of book. This is not a book where you just. We've been reading. Okay, great example. We've been reading. Bleep that out. My fiance and I have been reading. What are they called? The Mercedes Lackley Collegium series. It's Magical Horses. It's a lot of fun. It is not a book you got to keep up with a ton of. It's fun and it's stuff, but it's like it's a little bit kind of chill. It's something we read at night to just relax and unwind before I got to go home. Basically, this is not that at all. This is like if you want something to just. I've had a really rough day. And I want to turn my brain off. I feel like that Elantris maybe there's a few too many pieces, but for me, that's what made it so entertaining, is because it kept me engaged. I didn't feel like I was vegged out. I feel like, ooh, this is connecting to this, and this is. It was like a little bit of a puzzle while you're reading it, and I enjoyed that. But I could potentially see some readers being like, this is just making my head hurt a little bit. It's not super confusing, but it is. You're keeping up with 3 protagonists at the same time who are all having interweaving schemes trying to play off of each other.
I need to try to make you read Malice and just watch you self-destruct.
I've got the first book on audiobook, I know it's sin, but it's in the thing. That could be the next one, maybe, except for Star Wars is the next one, isn't it?
I don't know, we have to lay down a better schedule.
Well, I don't know.
Part of the problem with recording these is that he and I are on very opposite schedules.
Well, you're at night.
Yeah, I work night shift on a freight team, and he works during the days.
And I get one weekend off every 3 weeks, basically, because I'm also trying to plan a wedding.
Yeah, so it's hard for us to coordinate these. That's why that's one of the reasons why there was a big gap between this one and the last one.
But it's fun. So yeah, I think pretty much anyone can read Mistborn. I don't feel like, and I think 99% of people can enjoy Elantris. Just go in with the right mindset.
Now, if you're one of those people that has only ever read Song of Ice and Fire, 1, you're part of the problem. 2, yeah, if you go into this expecting it to be Song of Ice and Fire, you're gonna be disappointed.
It's the anti-Song of Ice and Fire.
I mean, Brandon Sanderson is like the anti-George R.R. Martin.
In that you like his work.
They're both fat guys. It's just you like one of them.
But yeah, I'm glad you've enjoyed both these. That makes me happy because I will sing these books. I've literally, again, basically when we met, I was like, "Hey, you should read Brandon Sanderson." You're like, "Why are you talking to me?"
We went full circle.
Yeah. Now I got to read Malazan so we can go full circle. I
think I was reading the Malazan book sitting next to you in class.
Well, no, you were writing books. That's why we started.
Oh yeah,
chatting.
I was doing that too.
That's why I knew to talk to you. I know, we may even cut this off, but a personal story how I met Nightfall. We were in coding class, and I'm completely lost, because it's not hard, but it's slightly more than beginner.
This was a 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. night class, 3-hour-long night class.
I've never written a line of code. You've written a decent amount at that point and taken some class. You basically taken this class in another language.
I had roughly taught myself how to script video games in high school, and I had taken 2 semesters of computer science before I had gotten into this class.
And then they made you take...
Then they made me just take this level 1 coding course, and I was sitting in there half asleep, just doing whatever I wanted to in the back row.
Yeah, so I never touched a line of code. I still think, even though it was on the easier side, I still think something like CSS or HTML would have been an easier jumping on point. I was really lost. So I look over, and you're sitting next to me, and you are... A, so good and bored with this, so coding that you're just bored, and B, writing fiction. And I'm like, my new best friend. Because A, I also want to write, and B, you are good at this. Help me, please. I'm sinking.
and so I tutored him through the entire semester.
Yep.
And we have been very good friends ever since.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So I guess we're going to end this one, even though I don't want to, because I got to go at some point. And the bourbon's out. But
he has to run before I fill his glass up again.
Oh no. But yeah, I think big recommend for both of us. I guess next time we'll figure out a schedule it next time.
Yes.
Maybe Star Wars?
Maybe Star Wars.
Maybe Malazan?
Maybe Malazan, we'll see.
Maybe your book on audio.
Do we want to announce that?
I don't care. Yeah, let's do it.
You may see, in addition to possibly more of these podcasts, that we do want to try to make a regular thing. You might see some more audio drama kind of short things pop up.
Because we really like doing the OCT together.
Yes, he and I competed against each other, but we also kind of collaborated on some of his work in that too.
Oh yeah. Well, you had to voice some of the, because I was getting all my competitors to also voice the characters.
I know.
I'm like, hope they don't give bad performances. So
I was the voice of Rings that I recorded on that god-awful gaming headset.
I did some editing to the voice. Not necessarily better, but I was trying to fit the time.
You did that editing, and it made me sound like Batman.
That wasn't intentional. That was to try and get the quality different. And I was like, well, whatever. Not everything about that was perfect. It was a lot of fun, and we were talking about it. And you've got some short stories that we were talking about.
Yes, I got the first one on the docket. Is going to be a little short called "Heroes Die."
Yes,
which
I like.
Is about as uplifting as it sounds. It's actually awesome, and most of the people that have read it have liked it. So
I'm nodding in my head, yes.
Dallen is going to help me get audio for it, and it's going to be a little feature thing.
Yeah, we're going to try and get that set up, and then that's going to be testing grounds, because ideally we'd really like to try and get kind of an audio series going, actually, like independent, you and I just
small independent little audio drama series.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our test bed for that. You can let us know if you like it, and us.
Well, we're probably going to do it either way, but you can give us...
That way you can validate our feelings.
And you can tell us how to improve, because I think we'll probably start with Heroes Die, and then maybe they can go, I don't like the narrator, or I don't like the audio mixing, or whatever, and we'll say, we have no money, so this is... But constructive criticisms help, because I got a lot of constructive criticism on the OCTs, and I feel like they each one improved fairly fairly drastically, if I may say so myself.
I thought you were generally an upward trend with
The
those.
first to the third, I felt pretty proud of. By the time I got to the third, I was like, I'm pretty proud of this. Sure, the mic gave out in the middle of it, and I had to edit different lines together to get that one person's voice line in, but I mean, I feel pretty proud. But yeah, I think to come back to the original point,
You need to make a making of that last one, just because of all the tribulations you had to deal with.
oh boy.
But
no.
Anyways, yeah, be on the lookout for those. Be on the lookout for more episodes. We're not just going to talk about fantasy novels. We have
Star Wars, Spider-Man.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Star Wars movies because, those wrapped up. For better or ill, those wrapped up.
Boy!
We're going to talk about Spider-Man movies because, those always go well. Some of them do.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to talk about DC Comics movies.
Yeah.
Because, those need DC Comics in general just needs a good flogging. Yeah. We're going to start with the movies. And if you liked Justice League, you're not going to have fun for that one.
We're usually cynical. This is nice. I'm glad we've had some optimism because my channel has been nothing but negativity lately. Also, on a personal note, God willing, I'm going to try and get a 2019 in review out, but I'm also getting married in March, so who knows if it'll be out. Look out for that in December! I don't know when I'm editing this. We'll figure that out. Okay.
Alright, sound off.
This is Dallen and Nightfall.
Sounding off.
Ciao!
Alright. Leave that in.